All right, so overview of midterm one. First question is from chapter 3. I put A, B, and C here because this is a lengthy question, and so I want to make sure that you recognize that you've got to answer all of it. And it looks long, but it's really not that long because part B gives a lot of information. So, part A. Describe in detail the backlash to the civil rights movement from whites and explain how racial polarization led to the creation of the Southern Strategy. So you want to focus on three things here. Go back, review chapter 3, and look at the details regarding the backlash to the civil rights movement. It is not a surprise that not everyone was in favor of this movement, and so there were a number of things that some whites engaged in to try to deter the success of the civil rights movement. Also, you have to explain racial polarization and tell how this racial polarization led to the creation of the Southern Strategy, which was used very successfully in the late 1960s and to early 1970s in politics. Part B, think about these recent events. The Black Lives Matter protests across the US during the late spring and early summer of 2020. And the other is the storming of the US Capitol building on January 6th, 2021. Do you think there was any difference in how people who were part of these events were described and treated differently? Why or why not? So for this part, this is all your opinion. Of course, support your opinion. Don't just say, no, I think they are two different things, and therefore people were treated differently because they were two different things. That's an opinion, but it doesn't explain how you reach that conclusion. Tell me how you reach your conclusion. It doesn't matter to me whether you say you think they were treated differently or you don't think they were treated differently. What I'm interested in knowing is how you reach your conclusion. Explain to me what the factors are that lead you to one opinion or the other. Part C, finally explain coded language and discuss at least 3 ways it is still commonly used. And here I tell you, you can use examples from the media or personal observation. So coded language, again, go back, review it, discuss 3 ways that you see it happening in the United States. And again, personal observation or media, stories that you've read, Instagram, whatever. That's question 1. Question 2 is from chapter 4. Here I tell you to discuss in detail the periods when affirmative action was white and not white. So 2 different time periods. Affirmative action was white, and then it became non-white. It was benefiting people of color, or at least intended to. Prior to the 1960s, there were different affirmative action programs. We didn't call them that, but the authors of the text lay out an argument that some of these different programs were in fact a type of affirmative action that benefited whites. Then I want you to compare these 2 periods. How are they similar? How are they different? Discuss whether you agree with the authors of the text that before the 1960s, affirmative action did exist, but it was for whites. Do you think that affirmative action in its current form should continue to be used? Why or why not? So again, this part is really about your opinion. Tell me what you think. Explain how you reach your conclusions. Do you believe that affirmative action hurts white people, also known as reverse discrimination? Lots of talk about reverse discrimination starting in the late 1960s, even going through today. Every now and then you'll see an argument being made about how whites are being hurt by reverse discrimination. There is even a lawsuit against Harvard that is still pending, to my knowledge, with Asian and white students who have filed a class action lawsuit against Harvard University because they claim that the affirmative action program that Harvard uses is harmful to them because it means they don't get in when others who are less qualified should get in. So, does a meritocracy exist in U.S., or is it not what you know, but who you know that is true? There's that old cliche. Explain your answer. Okay, and there's a video in the module. I believe I gave you a discussion based on it, where the speaker explains his view of meritocracy. And I'm asking you to discuss, what is your view? Question number 3 is from chapter 1. Explain the 5 fallacies about racism in detail and give examples of each fallacy. Go back to chapter 1, review these 5 fallacies. They don't have to be in any particular order as long as you have all 5. Discuss at least one instance when you observed one of the fallacies at work. Again, this can be something you've seen on TV, in a TV show, your own personal interaction, or personal interaction that you've observed. One of the fallacies. Explain the concept of intersectionality and discuss your intersectionality. Remember, the concept is one in which it's the idea that all of the characteristics that you have as an individual, your sex, your gender, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your ethnicity, your race, your level of your physicality, etc. All the characteristics about you, all of these things influence how you experience the United States, how you experience other countries. And so I'm asking you here to tell me about your intersectionality. You don't have to explain all the parts of your intersectionality, but 2 or 3 characteristics and how those things influence the way that you feel around some groups. Are you more comfortable with some groups? Are you less comfortable with others? Explain. And then the last part, well, it says finally twice, but it's a typo. Finally, explain symbolic violence and discuss how its presence and use in the U.S. helps to perpetuate racial inequality. So symbolic violence, as discussed in the textbook, we can think of things such as the Confederate flag. Many sociologists would argue that something like the Confederate flag or the KKK hood, these are types of symbolic violence, and that the presence of these things helps to perpetuate racial inequality. Now, of course, maybe you don't think it does. Maybe you don't. Maybe you think that in order to remember our history, we have to have these reminders around. Again, explain your conclusion. And then, do you view the Confederate flag as symbolic violence? Why or why not? So, is it just part of history? Is it symbolic violence? What is your opinion? How did you reach your conclusion? Last question, number 4, from chapter 2. Identify at least 3 ways present-day U.S. society is similar to one of the following centuries. Okay, choose one century. You don't have to discuss all of them, just one. 17, 18, or 19. Choose at least 2 philosophers, writers, or scientists discussed in the chapter and discuss their ideas about race and how these ideas help to form classification systems that were founded on the concept of white supremacy. Give specific detail. Okay, so the first part of this, choose one of those centuries, identify 3 ways that things that were happening in that century are similar to what's happening today. The 2 philosophers or writers or scientists discuss how their ideas of race help to shape how we think about people, how we began to classify people, and how their ideas help to create the system by which we classify people. Think about the history you learned during K through 12 education and explain at least 3 ways the information was different or only a partial version of the account you read about in the textbook. Why do you think the situation of different or incomplete history taught in the K through 12 years continues to exist? Okay, so that part about what you learned, K through 12, that's based upon what you learned, and think about 3 ways that what you're learning now is different or only partially true or factual. And why do you think that this continues to happen? That's it in a nutshell. Study, make sure that you review before you start to take the test. If you log in and you find that you are not as prepared as you thought, you can log out. You do have 2 tries on this test. You will be able to log in later when you are better prepared. Only the highest grade will be recorded in the gradebook. And of course, if you have questions, you can always send me an email. Bye.